Story 1. Daniel Joe Hiddle was born on March 1st, 1950. He was adopted as a baby. His adoptive parents lived on a farm in Staples, Minnesota. They raised him on that farm. As a teenager, Daniel had a problem with anger. One night, a neighbor's dog kept barking. The noise made Daniel very upset. He took a club and beat the dog until it died. He did not show any sadness for what he did. When Daniel grew older, he continued to hurt animals. His adoptive parents owned a dog. One day, Daniel tied that dog to a tree. He shot the dog with a gun. He left the dog hanging there. Then he fired another shot into the side of his parents' house. The bullet tore a hole in the wall. Daniel laughed and said he had air-conditioned the house. He thought this was a joke. Daniel also treated people badly. He married his first wife. When she refused to give him his car keys, he pointed a loaded shotgun at her. He hit her 1-year-old daughter in the face. Another time, he gave the little girl a monkey doll. Later, he took the doll away and tied it over her playpen like a hangman's noose. On a different day, Daniel beat his first wife while she was upset. He brought her daughter into the room to watch. He told the little girl to say goodbye to her mom. Then he started choking his wife very hard. Daniel married a second wife. On the day of their wedding shower, he broke a mirror. She did not clean up the pieces fast enough, so he hit her. He also shot out one of her car tires. When she was pregnant and past her due date, he kicked her in the stomach. He slapped her baby daughter across the face because the baby would not stop crying. Daniel did not support them with money. He spent his disability pension on alcohol instead. In 1973, Daniel lived with his adoptive parents on their farm. Their dog scratched his truck. This made Daniel very angry. He decided to kill his parents because of the scratch. He stabbed them both to death. He did not show much remorse for what he had done. The police arrested Daniel. He was convicted of killing his adoptive parents. The court sentenced him to 30 years in prison. While in prison, Daniel broke many rules. He was written up for having a knife. He was caught with drug paraphernalia twice. He disobeyed direct orders. He had marijuana. He interfered with a correctional officer. He caused disorderly conduct. He refused to follow orders while in segregation. He encouraged other inmates to riot. He destroyed property while in segregation. He was verbally abusive. He set a fire. He used drugs again. He fought with another inmate. Daniel served 11 years of his 30-year sentence. In 1984, he was granted parole. He was released from prison. He was free, but he was still on parole. That meant he had to follow rules. One of the rules was that he could not carry a gun. After his release, Daniel moved away from Minnesota. He went to live in Texas. He started using drugs. He met a woman named Mary Goss. She became his drug dealer. He bought drugs from her. Their relationship was not friendly. They argued often. Mary Goss had a daughter named Christy Condon, who was 4 years old. Mary also had a boyfriend named Richard Cook Jr., and she had a friend named Raymond Scott Gregg. Daniel knew all of these people. Daniel also had a second wife at this time. They argued a lot. Their neighbors could hear them fighting. Daniel's anger was still inside him. He had not changed since he was a teenager. He still hurt people and animals. He still carried rage. He was on parole for 2 murders, but he did not seem to care about following the law. From the point where Part 1 ended, Daniel was on parole and living in Texas. He continued to buy drugs from Mary Goss, but their feud grew worse. Mary Goss had Daniel arrested in August 1989 for slashing her tires. Daniel was angry about this arrest. He told several people that he intended to kill Mary Goss. He said he would not leave any witnesses. On November 15, 1989, Daniel went to a party at Mary Goss's home in East Dallas. Other people at the party included Mary's daughter Christy Condon, Mary's boyfriend Richard Cook Jr., and a friend named Raymond Scott Gregg. Also there was Mary's sister Tammy. The party went on for a while. Around 10:30 p.m., Tammy left the party. Daniel left soon after her. Daniel drove his red Chevy pickup truck to his own home. When he arrived, it was about 11 p.m. A neighbor overheard Daniel and his wife arguing. The neighbor heard Daniel say, "I am going to kill the bee." Then the neighbor went outside and saw Daniel holding a long-barreled gun. It was a 20-gauge shotgun. Daniel got back into his red pickup truck and drove away. At about 11:10 p.m., Daniel was speeding down a road in Garland, Texas. A police officer named Gerald Walker saw the red pickup truck going too fast. Officer Walker was 48 years old. He had been a police officer in Garland for 17 years. He turned on his lights and pulled Daniel over. Officer Walker got out of his patrol car and walked toward Daniel's truck. He did not know that Daniel was on parole. He did not know that Daniel was not allowed to have a gun. As Officer Walker came close to the driver's side window, Daniel raised his shotgun and fired one shot. The shot hit Officer Walker in the chest at close range. Officer Walker fell to the ground. He died there. Before Officer Walker was shot, he had radioed the license plate number of Daniel's red truck to police dispatch. That was a normal step when an officer pulls over a vehicle. He had already sent the information. So even after he was shot, the police had Daniel's license plate number. Daniel did not stay at the scene. He drove away. He headed toward Mary Goss's home. He arrived at about 11:25 p.m. He got out of his truck carrying the shotgun. He went to the front door. He kicked the door in. Then he entered the home. Inside were Mary Goss, Richard Cook Jr., Raymond Scott Gregg, and 4-year-old Christy Condon. Daniel began firing his shotgun. He shot Mary Goss. She died. He shot Richard Cook Jr. He died. He shot Raymond Scott Gregg. He died. That was 3 adults killed with the first rounds. But Daniel had not killed Christy yet. He stopped. He reloaded his shotgun with different ammunition. Then he shot the 4-year-old girl. Christy Condon was hit badly. She was still breathing, but she was severely wounded. Daniel did not wait to see if she died. He left the home, got back into his red truck, and drove toward his own home. At about 11:45 p.m., Tammy Goss came back to Mary's apartment. She found the bodies of her sister Mary, Richard Cook, and Raymond Gregg. She found Christy lying on the floor. The little girl was gurgling in her own blood. Tammy called for help. Christy was taken to a hospital, but the doctors saw that her brain was already dying. 2 days later, on November 17, 1989, Christy Condon died in the hospital. She was 4 years old. Meanwhile, the police had Daniel's license plate number from Officer Walker's radio call. They were looking for the red pickup truck. They spotted it near Daniel's home. Police officers began chasing Daniel. Daniel drove fast. He tried to get away, but he ran his truck off the road and wrecked it. Even after the crash, Daniel did not give up. He got out of the truck with his shotgun. He began shooting at the police officers who were chasing him. The officers shot back. The gunfight continued until Daniel ran out of ammunition. His shotgun was empty. Then the police ordered him to show his hands. Daniel refused. The police sent a dog to bite him. The dog grabbed him. Still, Daniel did not obey. The police sent the dog a second time. After the second attack, Daniel finally put his hands up and surrendered. He was arrested at that moment. When the police examined Daniel's shotgun, they found that it matched the bullets and shell casings from all 5 shootings. Officer Gerald Walker, Mary Goss, Richard Cook Jr., Raymond Scott Gregg, and Christy Condon. The same gun had killed all 5 people. After Daniel was arrested at the crash site, the police already knew about Officer Walker's death. They had found Officer Walker's body on the road where Daniel shot him. They also received a call from Tammy Goss about the 4 bodies at Mary Goss's apartment. So the police knew they had 5 victims, 1 police officer and 4 civilians, including a child. The police collected evidence from both scenes. They found shotgun shell casings on the road where Officer Walker was shot. They found more casings inside Mary Goss's apartment. They also found the same type of ammunition at Daniel's wrecked truck. A forensic expert matched all the casings to Daniel's 20-gauge shotgun. The gun was seized from Daniel when he was arrested. That evidence linked him directly to all 5 murders. The police also spoke to witnesses. Tammy Goss told them she had left the party at 10:30 p.m. and returned to find the bodies. The neighbor who heard Daniel say, "I am going to kill the bee," gave a statement. The neighbor also saw Daniel leave his home with the shotgun. Other witnesses confirmed that Daniel had threatened Mary Goss months earlier, after he was arrested for slashing her tires. Daniel was charged with multiple counts of capital murder. However, the prosecutors decided to try him for only one murder, the killing of Officer Gerald Walker. They did this because a conviction for killing a police officer carried the death penalty just as clearly as the other murders. Trying him for all 5 at once could have made the case more complicated. The trial took place in Dallas County. The prosecution presented the evidence step by step. They showed the jury the shotgun. They played the radio call from Officer Walker. They showed photographs of the crime scenes. They called the neighbor, Tammy Goss, and the police officers who chased Daniel. They also called experts who matched the shell casings. At the punishment phase of the trial, the prosecution introduced Daniel's past behavior. They did this to show that he was a continuing danger to society. They told the jury about the 1973 murders of his adoptive parents in Minnesota. They told the jury he was on parole for those murders at the time of the 1989 shootings. They also told the jury about how he beat his wives, hurt children, and killed animals. The jury heard that Daniel had once told a friend that killing people was not that big of a deal. The jury also learned that Daniel had threatened police officers many times. The jury did not take long to decide. They deliberated for about 1 hour. They found Daniel guilty of capital murder for killing Officer Gerald Walker. Then, during the punishment phase, they decided that Daniel should receive the death sentence. The judge, State District Judge Richard Mays, pronounced the sentence. Daniel nodded. He did not say anything. After the trial, Daniel was sent to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. He arrived there on August 16, 1990. He spent the next 10 years on death row. He filed many appeals. 8 different courts, both state and federal, reviewed his case. All of them rejected his appeals. The United States Supreme Court reviewed his latest appeals and rejected them on December 5, 2000. Daniel did not ask the governor of Texas, George W. Bush, for clemency. The governor had the power to grant a one-time 30-day reprieve, but Daniel made no request. On December 6, 2000, Daniel Joe Hiddle was executed by lethal injection in Huntsville, Texas. He was 50 years old. His last statement was the name Sanajib Singh Ji, an Indian religious teacher who taught love and nonviolence. He then nodded, smiled, and winked at his spiritual advisor. The drugs were administered. He was pronounced dead at 6:20 p.m. 5 people lost their lives on November 15th and November 17th, 1989. Officer Gerald Walker, Mary Alice Goss, Richard Joseph Cook Jr., Raymond Scott Gregg, and 4-year-old Christy Condon. Daniel Joe Hiddle was the 679th person executed in the United States since 1976, and the 238th executed in Texas since that same year. He never showed remorse for any of his crimes. Story 2. Christopher Cornelius Goins was born on November 5, 1973. His mother raised him. He did not have a father living in the home. From a very young age, Christopher saw things that children should not see. His mother used drugs almost every day. She used drugs right in front of him. This happened so often that Christopher thought drug use was normal. He did not know any different. Because his mother used drugs, she did not take good care of him. She did not hold him. She did not hug him. She did not show him love or affection. His aunt later said that Christopher's mother never nurtured any of her children. This meant Christopher grew up without warmth from his own mother. He felt empty and unloved. There were no good adult role models in his family. His mother kept using drugs. One of his aunts also abused drugs. Another aunt died from AIDS. She got AIDS because she used drugs with needles. Christopher also had an uncle who was sent to prison. So almost every adult in his family had serious problems. Christopher had no one to show him how to live a normal life. His mother did not just ignore him. She also hurt him. She physically abused Christopher. The abuse happened many times. It got worse as he got older. By the time Christopher was 12 years old, the abuse was too much. Something had to change. His family decided that he could not stay with his mother anymore. So at age 12, Christopher was sent to live with his grandmother. He moved from his home to New York City. His grandmother lived there. Christopher thought this would be a fresh start, and for a while it was. His grandmother treated him differently than his mother did. She showed him kindness. She gave him attention. She made him feel like someone cared. This was the first time in his life that Christopher felt love from an adult. He started going to school in New York. He tried to settle into a new life. His grandmother became the most important person to him. She was the only person who had ever shown him real love. Christopher held on to that. He felt safe with her. But then something terrible happened. His grandmother died. Christopher was still young when she passed away. He was devastated. That is a strong word, but it fits. He fell apart inside. The only person who had ever loved him was gone. He did not know how to handle the loss. He had no one else to turn to. His cousins later said that Christopher was a kind person. They said he liked to play with his 6-year-old cousin Philip. He was gentle with young children. But after his grandmother died, something changed in him. The pain of losing her stayed with him. Without his grandmother, Christopher had no stable home. No one guided him. No one protected him. He began to spend time on the streets. He was still a teenager. He had no job skills. He had no education beyond what little he got in school. He had no father figure. He had no mother who cared. He had no grandmother anymore. He was alone. As a teenager and then a young adult, Christopher looked for someone to love him. He wanted connection. He wanted to feel like he mattered to someone. That need would lead him to make choices. And those choices would set him on a path. But that part of the story comes later. Christopher Goins moved back from New York to Virginia. He was a young man in his early 20s. He did not have a stable job. He did not have a place to call home. He was looking for someone to care about him. That is when he met a young girl named Tamika Jones. Tamika was only 14 years old. Despite her young age, Tamika became pregnant. Christopher Goins was the father of that unborn baby. Tamika Jones lived with her family in an apartment in Richmond, Virginia. The apartment was in an area called Gilpin Court. Living in that apartment were Tamika's mother and father. Her mother's name was Daphne Jones. She was 29 years old. Her father's name was James Nathaniel Randolph Jr. He was 35 years old. Tamika also had many siblings in that home. There was her sister Nicole, who was 9 years old. There was her brother David, who was 4 years old. There was her brother Robert, who was 3 years old. There was also a baby sister named Kenya, who was only 21 months old. That is less than 2 years old. The family knew that Tamika was pregnant with Christopher's baby. But Christopher was not happy about the pregnancy. He did not want to be a father. He was upset that Tamika was carrying his child. He began to feel angry. He thought about hurting Tamika. He also thought about hurting her whole family. He did not say these thoughts out loud to everyone, but he made threats. He told people that he wanted to kill Tamika and her family because she was pregnant by him. On October 14, 1994, Christopher Goins decided to act on his anger. He went to the Jones family apartment. He knew where they lived. He had been there before. When he arrived, he was not alone. He brought someone else with him. That person's name was Barry Scott. Barry Scott was present during the events that followed. Christopher entered the apartment. Once he was inside, he took out a handgun. It was a .45 caliber Glock pistol. He held the gun in his hand. He was ready to use it. He first went to where Tamika's mother Daphne was. He also saw Tamika's father James. He started shooting. He shot James Nathaniel Randolph Jr. in the head at least once. He shot Daphne Jones in the head at least once. Both of them died where they fell. They did not have time to run or fight back. Then Christopher moved through the apartment. He went to where the young children were. He found Nicole, who was 9 years old. He shot her in the head at least once. She died. He found David, who was 4 years old. He shot him in the head at least once. He died. He found Robert, who was 3 years old. He shot him in the head at least once. He died. Each of these children was killed the same way. A bullet to the head. No warning. No chance to hide. During this shooting, Tamika Jones was in her bedroom. She was 7 months pregnant. She could hear the gunshots from other rooms. She did not know who was shooting or why. Then Christopher Goins appeared in her bedroom doorway. He was holding the gun. He looked at her. Then he raised the gun and started shooting at her. He shot Tamika 9 times. 3 of those bullets hit her in the stomach. Her unborn baby was hit by one of those bullets. The bullet went through Tamika's body and into the baby's head. The baby died inside her. Tamika was badly wounded, but she did not die. Tamika tried to protect her baby sister Kenya. Kenya was only 21 months old. Tamika tried to shield the toddler with her own body. But Christopher kept shooting. 1 bullet hit Kenya in the arm. Kenya was wounded, but she also survived. She was the youngest person in that apartment that day. When Christopher finished shooting, 5 people were dead. James Randolph, Daphne Jones, Nicole Jones, David Jones, and Robert Jones. All shot in the head. 2 people were wounded. Tamika Jones shot 9 times. Kenya Jones shot in the arm. The unborn baby was also dead. Christopher Goins left the apartment. He did not call for help. He did not show any care for the victims. After Christopher left, someone called 911. Tamika Jones spoke to the operator. She was in shock. She was bleeding. But she told the operator what happened. She said that Christopher Goins was the shooter. She said his name clearly. The police were sent to the apartment. They arrived and saw the scene. 5 bodies. 2 wounded children. 1 pregnant teenager bleeding from 9 gunshot wounds. Barry Scott, the person who was with Christopher during the crimes, also knew what had happened. He had seen the shooting or heard it. He was present in the apartment at the time. The police later wanted to question him. But at that moment, Christopher Goins was not yet in custody. He had walked away from the apartment. He had the gun with him. He had killed 5 people and wounded 2 others. He did not know yet that Tamika had named him to the 911 operator. He thought he might get away. The police arrived at the Jones family apartment after the 911 call. They found the bodies of James Randolph, Daphne Jones, Nicole Jones, David Jones, and Robert Jones. Each victim had been shot in the head. The police also found Tamika Jones and Kenya Jones wounded but alive. Tamika was taken to a hospital. Kenya was taken to a hospital as well. Doctors worked to save them. Tamika survived her 9 gunshot wounds. Kenya survived her gunshot wound to the arm. However, Tamika's unborn baby could not be saved. The baby was declared dead. The police began their investigation immediately. They collected bullet casings from the floor of the apartment. They also collected the bullets that had lodged in walls or furniture. A forensic expert later examined these items. The expert determined that all the bullets and casings came from the same gun. That gun was a .45 caliber Glock pistol. The police also interviewed witnesses. The most important witness was Tamika Jones herself. Even though she was in the hospital, she gave a statement. She told the police that Christopher Goins was the shooter. She said his name clearly. She also described what he did. The police now had a suspect. The police then looked for Christopher Goins. They also looked for Barry Scott, the person who was with Goins during the shooting. The police wanted to question both men. They found evidence that connected Goins to the gun. A cartridge from the same .45 caliber Glock pistol was found in another location. That location was the apartment of Christopher Goins' girlfriend. This connected Goins directly to the murder weapon. Christopher Goins was arrested. He was taken into police custody. He was charged with multiple crimes. The charges included capital murder for the death of Robert Jones, who was 3 years old. He was also charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of James Randolph, Daphne Jones, Nicole Jones, and David Jones. He was charged with 2 counts of malicious wounding for shooting Tamika Jones and Kenya Jones. He was also charged with 7 counts of illegal use of a firearm during the commission of felonies. Barry Scott was also questioned by police. The police gave Barry Scott a polygraph test. That is a lie detector test. The results of that test were kept in the police file. Christopher Goins later asked to see those results. He believed they might show that Barry Scott was the real killer. But the prosecutor said there was nothing in the results that proved Goins was innocent. The court agreed. Goins was not allowed to see the polygraph results. The case went to trial in June 1995. The trial took place in Richmond, Virginia. The jury was not chosen from Richmond. Instead, the jury was chosen from Gloucester County, which is a rural area. The jurors were brought to Richmond by bus each day of the trial. During jury selection, Christopher Goins' lawyer asked the judge to ask the jurors questions about racial prejudice. Goins was African American. He wanted to know if any juror was afraid of people of another race or believed that black people were more violent. The judge said no to that request. The judge did not ask those questions. During the trial, the prosecutor played a videotape of the crime scene for the jury. The videotape showed the bodies and the blood. Christopher Goins' lawyer argued that the tape was not needed. He said everyone already knew who the victims were and that they were dead. He said the tape would only make the jury emotional and biased. The judge allowed the tape to be played anyway. The judge said the tape showed motive and intent. The prosecutor also played the 911 call that Tamika Jones made from the apartment. On that call, Tamika said that Christopher Goins was the shooter. Goins' lawyer argued that this statement should not be allowed in court. He said it was hearsay, which means second-hand information. But the judge said the call was allowed because Tamika was in a state of excited utterance. That means she was still panicked and afraid when she spoke, so her words were truthful. Tamika Jones testified in person at the trial. She was 14 years old at the time of the shooting. By the time of the trial, she was still recovering from her injuries. She told the jury exactly what happened. She said she heard Goins talking to her mother. Then she heard gunshots from 2 different rooms. Then Goins appeared at her bedroom door and shot her 9 times. She said she tried to shield her baby sister Kenya, but Goins shot Kenya too. Her testimony was clear and direct. Forensic experts also testified. They confirmed that all the bullets came from the same .45 caliber Glock pistol. They also confirmed that the cartridge found in Goins' girlfriend's apartment matched the gun used in the shootings. The jury found Christopher Goins guilty on all charges. Then the same jury decided his sentence. For the capital murder of Robert Jones, the 3-year-old boy, the jury recommended the death penalty. For the other 4 murders, the jury recommended life in prison. For the wounding of Tamika and Kenya, the jury recommended additional years. The judge agreed with the jury. The judge imposed the death sentence for the murder of Robert Jones. The judge also imposed 4 life terms for the other murders. And the judge imposed 73 years for the other charges, including the woundings and the gun charges. The sentencing happened in July 1995. Christopher Goins was sent to death row. He was 21 years old at the time of sentencing. After the trial, Goins and his lawyers filed appeals. An appeal is a request for a higher court to review the case. Goins argued many things. He said the videotape of the crime scene was unfair. He said the 911 call should not have been allowed. He said he should have seen the polygraph results from Barry Scott. He said his trial lawyer did not do a good job. He said the jury should have been asked about racial bias. One by one, the courts rejected these arguments. The Virginia State Courts said no. The federal courts said no. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals said no. The United States Supreme Court looked at the case multiple times and each time refused to stop the execution. Goins also asked the governor of Virginia for clemency. Clemency is mercy from the governor that can reduce a sentence. The governor at that time was Jim Gilmore. Governor Gilmore reviewed the case. He read the court decisions. He looked at the facts. On the day of the execution, about 2 hours before it was scheduled, Governor Gilmore said no to clemency. He said he would not intervene. The execution was set for December 6, 2000. Christopher Goins was 27 years old on that day. The execution took place at the Greensville Correctional Center in Virginia. The method was lethal injection. This means drugs were put into his veins to stop his heart. Before the execution, witnesses were allowed in the room. Among the witnesses were Tamika Jones, who was now 20 years old and living in California. Also present were the prosecutor who handled the case, David Hicks, and the lead detective, C.T. Woody. Goins was brought into the death chamber. He looked around and said, "Look, we've got an audience." Then he gave a final statement. He said, "There's no God but Allah." He did not apologize. He did not show remorse. The drugs were given. At 9:04 p.m., Christopher Cornelius Goins was pronounced dead. He was the 680th person executed in the United States since the death penalty was allowed again in 1976. He was the 81st person executed in Virginia since that same year. Tamika Jones survived her wounds. She moved to California and started a new life. Kenya Jones also survived her gunshot wound. The Jones family lost 5 members that day: James Randolph, Daphne Jones, Nicole Jones, David Jones, and Robert Jones. They also lost the unborn baby. Christopher Goins went to his death without ever saying he was sorry for what he did. Story 3. Edward Castro was born on January 26, 1950. He was born in the United States. The exact city and state where he was born are not clearly written in most public records. What is known is that he grew up in a family with a mother and several siblings. Later in his life, records show he had at least 7 family members, including his mother and brothers or sisters. When Edward was a child, he did not have a very stable or settled life. He moved from place to place as he grew older. He did not finish a lot of school. He also did not learn a trade or hold a long-term job. As a young man, he started to drift. That means he moved from one town to another without a permanent home. He did not stay in one place for very long. Edward developed habits that kept him moving. He liked to drink beer. He spent time in bars. He did not have a regular paycheck. Instead, he looked for easy ways to get money. He also looked for cars he could use. He did not have his own car at many points in his life. He needed rides from other people. As Edward got older, he began to spend time with older men. He met them in bars and other places where people drank alcohol. He would talk to them. He would act friendly. These older men often had something Edward wanted. Some had money. Some had cars. Edward learned that if he was nice to them, they might give him things or let him stay with them. Edward never married. He did not have children. He did not have a home of his own. He lived as a drifter. A drifter is someone who moves from town to town with no real plan. He stayed in cheap rooms. He sometimes stayed with people he met. He did not have a steady group of friends. Most of the people he knew were people he met in bars or on the road. By the time Edward reached his mid-30s, he had already spent many years living this way. He had no savings. He had no job. He had no home. He had a habit of drinking beer, especially a brand called Old Milwaukee. He also had a habit of looking for older men who had things he wanted. He did not think about the future. He only thought about where he would sleep next and how he would get his next drink. His mother still cared about him. She kept in touch with him over the years. His siblings also knew about him, but Edward did not stay close to them. He preferred to be on the road. He preferred to move from place to place. This way of living went on for many years. He did not change. He did not try to find a steady job or a home. He just kept drifting from one town to the next. By January 1987, Edward Castro was 36 years old. He was living the same way he had lived for most of his adult life. He had no money. He had no car. He had no permanent address. He was moving through Florida. He went to towns like Ocala, St. Petersburg, and Polk County. He spent time in bars. He looked for older men. He drank beer. He slept in cheap rooms or in other people's homes. This was the life he knew. This was the life he had built for himself. In January 1987, Edward Castro was moving through Florida. He had no car and no money. He needed a way to get both. His plan was simple. He would find older men who had cars and cash. He would act friendly to them. Then he would take what they had. The first murder happened on January 4th, 1987. That day, Edward went to a bar in St. Petersburg, Florida. At the bar, he met a man named George Larry Hill. George was an interior designer. He was older than Edward. George had a car and likely had some money. Edward talked to George at the bar. He acted friendly. After some time, George agreed to go with Edward. They went to George's home or to another place. Once they were alone, Edward attacked George. He bound him, which means he tied him up. He also gagged him, which means he put something over his mouth so George could not scream. Then Edward stabbed George to death. After the murder, Edward took George's car and any money he could find. He drove away. He left George's body behind. Edward did not stay in St. Petersburg. He took George's car and drove to other parts of Florida. He kept moving. He did not have a place to stay. He looked for his next opportunity. A few days later, Edward went to Polk County, Florida. There he met another older man named Claude J. Henderson. Edward used the same method. He acted friendly. He got Claude alone. Then he stabbed Claude to death. After the murder, Edward took Claude's car and any money Claude had. He drove away in the stolen car. He left Claude's body behind. Edward now had a car, but he wanted more. He drove to Ocala, Florida. He found a small room to stay in. It was an efficiency apartment, which is a very small one-room place. He did not have much money left. He needed more cash and possibly a better car. On January 14th, 1987, Edward went out looking for another older man. He found a 56-year-old man named Austin Carter Scott. Austin was white. He lived in Ocala. He was a regular person. He was not related to Edward. They did not know each other before that day. Edward approached Austin and started talking to him. Edward pretended to be friendly. He offered Austin something that many men liked. He said he had Old Milwaukee beer. Edward promised to share the beer with Austin if Austin would come back to his room. Austin agreed to the offer. He did not know that Edward had a plan to hurt him. Austin went with Edward to the small apartment room. Once they were inside, Edward did not give Austin the beer. Instead, Edward attacked him. Edward started by choking Austin with his hands. He put his hands around Austin's neck and squeezed. Austin could not breathe. He tried to fight back. His face began to turn purple from the lack of air. While he was choking Austin, Edward reached down to his own sock. He had hidden a knife inside his sock. He pulled the knife out. Then he looked at Austin's face. Edward saw that Austin's face was purple. Edward spoke to Austin. He said, "Hey man, you've lost. Dig it?" That meant Edward was telling Austin that the fight was over and Austin had lost. Then Edward started stabbing Austin with the knife. He stabbed Austin in the chest. He stabbed him 8 times. The knife went deep into Austin's chest. The blade went through Austin's ribs and into his lungs. Austin tried to defend himself. He raised his arms to block the knife. He got 3 cuts on his arms. Those were defensive wounds. That means he was trying to protect himself while Edward kept stabbing him. The stabbing caused Austin's lungs to fill with blood. His chest cavity filled up with blood. He could not breathe. He died within a few minutes. Edward did not call for help. He did not try to save Austin. He let Austin die on the floor of the small room. After Austin was dead, Edward took what he wanted. He took Austin's car. He also took any money Austin had. Then Edward left the room. He did not clean up the blood. He did not hide Austin's body. He simply left it there on the floor. He got into Austin's car and drove away from Ocala. Edward drove north. He went to a town called Lake City in Columbia County, Florida. He thought he had gotten away with the murder. He still had blood on his clothes from the stabbing. He did not bother to change or wash. He just kept driving in Austin's stolen car. At this point, no one had found Austin's body. No one had reported Edward for the murder. But Edward did something that would later bring him to the attention of the police. In Lake City, he got into trouble for a different reason. He was acting drunk and disorderly. He was causing a disturbance. The police in Lake City were called. They arrested Edward on those charges. When they arrested him, they saw that he had blood on his clothes. They also saw that he was driving a car that was not his. They began to ask him questions. Edward decided to talk. He told the police about the murder of Austin Scott. He told them where to find the body. He led the officials back to Ocala. They went to the small room. They found Austin Carter Scott's body on the floor. He had been stabbed 8 times. He had marks on his arms from trying to defend himself. The police now knew that Edward had committed a murder. While Edward was in custody for the Scott murder, he also told the police about the other 2 killings. He told them about George Larry Hill in St. Petersburg. He told them about Claude J. Henderson in Polk County. He confessed to all 3 murders. He admitted that he had killed older men to steal their cars and their money. He showed no regret at the time. He simply explained what he had done and how he had done it. The police had enough evidence to charge Edward with murder. They had his confession. They had the body of Austin Scott. They had the blood on his clothes. They had the stolen car. The case against Edward was very strong. After Edward Castro confessed to the murder of Austin Carter Scott, the police in Columbia County contacted the authorities in Ocala. The Ocala police opened a formal murder investigation. They went to the small apartment room where Austin's body was found. They took photographs. They collected the knife that Edward had used. They measured the stab wounds on Austin's body. The medical examiner wrote a report. The report said Austin died because his lungs filled with blood. The police also interviewed Edward multiple times. Each time, Edward told the same story. He said he choked Austin, then stabbed him 8 times. He admitted he took Austin's car. He did not claim self-defense. He did not say he was sorry at that time. The police wrote down everything Edward said. These written statements became evidence. Because Edward had confessed to killing 2 other men, the police in St. Petersburg and Polk County also opened investigations. They found the body of George Larry Hill. They found evidence that Edward had stabbed and bound him. The state of Florida charged Edward with the murder of George Larry Hill. For the murder of Claude J. Henderson, Edward was never formally tried. There is no public record of a trial for that death. The most important case was the murder of Austin Carter Scott. The state of Florida decided to seek the death penalty. The prosecutors believed the crime was very serious. Austin was killed for his car and money. He was lured to the room with a false promise of beer. He was choked and then stabbed 8 times. These facts made the case eligible for the death sentence. Edward's first trial for the Scott murder began in 1988. The trial took place in Marion County, Florida, where Ocala is located. The prosecutors presented the evidence. They showed the knife. They showed the medical examiner's report. They showed Edward's confession. Edward's lawyers tried to defend him, but the evidence was very strong. The jury found Edward guilty of first-degree murder. The same jury then had to decide the punishment. In Florida, the jury gives a recommendation to the judge. The jury voted. They recommended the death penalty. The judge agreed. On February 9, 1988, the judge sentenced Edward Castro to death for the murder of Austin Carter Scott. For the murder of George Larry Hill, Edward was given a life sentence. He was sent to death row at Florida State Prison in Stark. After the sentence, Edward had the right to appeal. An appeal is a request for a higher court to review the case. Edward's lawyers filed appeals. In 1989, the Florida Supreme Court looked at the case. The court found some errors in the first penalty phase. That means the part of the trial where the jury decided the punishment had mistakes. The court sent the case back to the lower court to fix the errors. A second penalty phase was held. Another jury heard the facts again. They voted on the punishment. This time, the vote was 8-4 in favor of death. The judge again sentenced Edward to death. Edward's lawyers appealed again. The Florida Supreme Court reviewed the case again. In 1992, 1994, and 1999, the court issued rulings. Each time, the court upheld the death sentence. The case also went to other courts. None of them changed the sentence. Then something unusual happened. Edward decided he did not want to fight anymore. He fired all of his state-hired lawyers. He told the judge that he was ready to die. In 1997, he spoke to Circuit Judge Jack Singbush. Edward said that asking for more appeals would be wrong. He said he never gave his victim the chance to beg for his life. Therefore, he would not beg for his own life. The judge found that Edward was competent. That means he understood what he was doing and was mentally able to make that choice. From 1997 until 2000, Edward did not file any more appeals. He did not ask for help. He refused to let lawyers file on his behalf. This was very rare. Most death row inmates file many appeals to try to stop their execution. Edward did the opposite. He told the courts to let the punishment happen. On November 14, 2000, Governor Jeb Bush signed a death warrant. That is the official document that sets the execution date. Edward's execution was scheduled for December 7, 2000. Before that date, the Florida Board of Executive Clemency considered whether to reduce Edward's sentence. Edward wrote letters to the board. He said he did not want them to spare his life. The board did not grant clemency. On December 7, 2000, Edward Castro was taken to the death chamber at Florida State Prison in Stark. Earlier that day, he was allowed to have his final visits. His mother and 7 other family members said goodbye to him. They were allowed 3 hours of visiting time. Edward also had a final meal. He chose a T-bone steak, fried shrimp, fried potatoes, fried onion rings, fried tomatoes, ice cream, and Coca-Cola. He also received an injection of Valium to make him calm. At 6:01 p.m., the prison guard opened the curtain to the witness room. Edward was lying on a gurney with his arms stretched out. Needles were placed in both arms. Edward turned his head and smiled. He winked. Then he was given the chance to make a final statement. He said, "Tell my mother I love her." He apologized to the families of the victims. He thanked everyone who had shown him love. He closed his eyes. At 6:02 p.m., the deadly chemicals began to flow into Edward's veins. 1 minute later, his eyes opened and fluttered. His mouth twitched. His head rose off the pillow. Then his body relaxed. His eyes closed again. He stopped breathing. A doctor checked him and declared Edward Castro dead at 6:15 p.m. Edward Castro was 50 years old. He was the 50th person executed in Florida since the state brought back the death penalty in 1979. The victims' families did not watch the execution. The state had tried to locate them, but could not find anyone to attend. Austin Carter Scott's ex-wife had already died. George Larry Hill's identical twin brother, Nathan Jerry Hill, stayed in his apartment during the execution. He said later that he felt weak in his knees when he heard Edward had apologized. The story of Edward Castro ended that night in the death chamber. Story 4. Claude Howard Jones was born on September 24, 1940, in Harris County, Texas. Harris County is where the city of Houston is located. His family lived in that area. Not many public records exist about his parents or whether he had brothers and sisters. But we know that Claude did not have a smooth or lawful childhood. As a young man, Claude did not finish high school in the normal way. He did not go to college. Instead, he began committing crimes early in his life. His first known conviction happened in 1959. He was 19 years old at that time. The crime was robbery. A judge sent him to prison for that offense. Claude served 6 years of a 9-year prison sentence. That means he was locked up from 1959 until 1963. After he got out, he did not stop breaking the law. In 1963, he was convicted again. This time the sentence was 5 years. He served 3 years of that sentence, from 1963 until 1965. Over the next several years, Claude kept collecting convictions. He was found guilty of multiple crimes in Texas. These included armed robbery, assault, and burglary. He also used fake names sometimes. Some of the names he used were Carl Roy Davis, Butch Jones, and Douglas Ray Stark. He seemed to move between prisons and short periods of freedom. Then, in 1976, something much more serious happened. Claude committed crimes in Kansas. He was convicted of murder, robbery, and assault in that state. The judge gave him a life sentence for the murder. That meant he was supposed to stay in prison for the rest of his life. But while he was already serving that life sentence inside a Kansas prison, Claude did another terrible thing. He killed another inmate. The way he did it was brutal. He threw gasoline on the other prisoner and then set him on fire. That man died from his burns. Claude was convicted for this killing as well. Even so, he did not receive an additional sentence that changed his status. He was already serving life. Despite having a life sentence, Claude was paroled. That means the prison system decided to let him out early. He was released on parole in 1984. He had served about 8 years of his life sentence. After getting out, he returned to Texas. He was now in his mid-40s. He had spent most of his adult life behind bars. He had no steady job or lawful career. He had a pattern of violence that had already taken at least one life inside a prison. And he was free again. Claude Howard Jones was out on parole in 1989. He had been free for about 5 years since his release from Kansas in 1984. He did not get a regular job or settle into a lawful life. Instead, he connected with 2 other men who were also willing to break the law. Their names were Kerry Daniel Dixon Jr. and Timothy Mark Jordan. On November 14, 1989, the 3 men gathered at the home of Jordan's father. They were somewhere in or near San Jacinto County, Texas. During this meeting, they made a plan. They decided to rob a liquor store. The store was called Zell's Liquor Store. It was located in a small town named Point Blank, Texas. Jordan gave a gun to the other men. The gun was a Taurus .357 Magnum revolver. Jordan's girlfriend, Terry Harden, had bought the gun. Jordan himself stayed behind at the mobile home. He did not go to the store, but he gave his gun to Jones and Dixon, and he let them use his truck as the getaway vehicle. Jones and Dixon left the mobile home together. They drove to the liquor store. The time was between 4 o'clock and 4:30 in the afternoon. The store owner, Alan Hilzendager, was inside. He was 44 years old. He was a white male. He worked alone at the store that day. When they arrived, Jones got out of the truck. Dixon stayed in the driver's seat. Jones walked into the store. He asked Hilzendager to retrieve a bottle for him. This was a trick. Jones wanted Hilzendager to turn his back so he could shoot him without being seen from the front. Hilzendager turned around to get the bottle. As soon as his back was turned, Jones took out the .357 Magnum revolver. He shot Hilzendager 3 times. The first shot hit Hilzendager in the upper left back. That bullet cut his aortic artery and punctured his lung. The second shot was fired from a distance of 18 to 24 inches. At that moment, Hilzendager had his hands raised, possibly trying to defend himself. The third shot hit Hilzendager in the side while he was already lying on the floor. Across the highway, a man named Leon Goodson and his 14-year-old daughter, Wendy, were working on a car. Wendy saw a pickup truck pull into the liquor store. She saw a man with a pot belly get out and go inside with Hilzendager. Then she heard 2 gunshots very fast, and after a short pause, a third shot. Her father heard the bangs too, but thought Hilzendager was banging on metal doors. Wendy asked her father, "Do you think they shot him?" Goodson stood up and looked across the street. He and Wendy saw the same man walk from the front of the counter to behind the counter, then come back out. The man pulled the door open and walked out very fast. He got into the passenger side of the truck. The truck drove away toward Oakhurst at high speed. After the shooting, Jones went to the cash register. He took 900 butha did not see ethermonithate ways in the store. Approximately 900 butha did not see ethermonithate ways in the store. Approximately 6,000 was in a bag pushed under the counter near the floor. Another $1,000 was in a bank bag under the cash register. Jones left that money behind. Later, Jones told friends that he killed Hilzendager because he believed Hilzendager was gay. That was his stated reason for the murder, not just a robbery. 3 days later, on November 17, 1989, Jones and his 2 accomplices committed another crime. They robbed a bank in Humboldt, Texas. That is a town near Houston. Jones went into the bank while Dixon and Jordan waited outside. He took approximately $14,000 from the bank. After that robbery, the 3 men took a weekend trip to Las Vegas, Nevada, to spend the money. About 3 weeks after the liquor store murder, Jones was not yet caught for that crime. Instead, he was arrested in Fort Myers, Florida. The charge was bank robbery. He was taken into custody in Florida for that offense. The arrest in Florida would later lead to solving the Texas murder. After Jones was arrested in Florida for bank robbery, law enforcement officers in Texas began connecting him to the murder of Alan Hilzendager. The murder itself had been discovered on the same day it happened. Leon Goodson and his daughter, Wendy, had called the police immediately after finding Hilzendager's body. Officers arrived at Zell's liquor store on November 14, 1989. They saw the body on the floor with 3 gunshot wounds. They also saw that money was missing from the cash register. But at that time, they did not know who the shooter was. The investigation moved forward when witnesses gave descriptions. Leon Goodson and Wendy described the shooter as a white male in his 40s, about 5 feet 10 inches tall, weighing between 200 and 230 pounds, with a beer belly and wearing a tight gray jogging shirt. That description matched Claude Jones. Police also found physical evidence at the crime scene. A strand of hair was collected from the liquor store. Later, forensic testing showed that the hair belonged to Claude Jones. This was a key piece of evidence linking him directly to the murder location. The 2 accomplices also helped solve the case. Timothy Mark Jordan decided to cooperate with prosecutors. He agreed to testify against Jones and Carrie Dixon in exchange for a lighter sentence. Jordan told police what had happened. He explained how they planned the robbery, how he gave his gun to Jones and Dixon, and how Jones returned with the money after the shooting. Based on Jordan's information, officers went to the Trinity River. There, they recovered the murder weapon. It was the Taurus .357 Magnum revolver that Jordan had given to Jones. Kerry Daniel Dixon Jr. was also arrested and charged. He did not testify against Jones, but Jordan's testimony, along with the hair evidence and witness identifications, was strong enough for the prosecution. Jones was brought back to Texas from Florida to stand trial for capital murder. The trial took place in San Jacinto County. The prosecutors presented the following facts to the jury. Jones entered the store, asked Hilzendager to turn around, shot him 3 times, took $900, and fled. They showed that the murder happened during a robbery. Under Texas law, killing someone during a robbery is capital murder. That crime can be punished by death. The jury heard from Leon Goodson and his daughter Wendy. They heard from Timothy Jordan. They saw the hair evidence. They learned that Jones had a long criminal record, including a previous murder in Kansas. On September 10, 1990, the jury found Claude Howard Jones guilty of capital murder. In the punishment phase, the same jury decided that he should receive the death penalty. He was sentenced to death. Dixon was convicted of murder, but did not receive the death penalty. He was sentenced to 60 years in prison. Jordan received a 10-year prison sentence for his role in the crime. Jones spent the next 10 years on death row in Texas. He filed multiple appeals. He asked higher courts to review his case. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed his conviction in 1991. The United States Supreme Court rejected his appeals in 1995 and again in October 2000. In the days before his scheduled execution, Jones asked for DNA testing of some evidence. He later withdrew that request. He did not ask the governor for a pardon or a reprieve. On December 7, 2000, Claude Howard Jones was scheduled to be executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas. He was 60 years old. Prison staff had difficulty finding suitable veins in his hands and arms to insert the intravenous lines. Normally, 2 IVs are used. That night, they could only get 1/4 to work. They inserted it into his left thigh instead of his arm. This caused a delay of about 30 minutes. Jones was given a chance to make a final statement. He looked at 5 members of Hilzendager's family. He said, "I hope this can bring some closure to y'all. I'm sorry for your loss." Then he looked toward another window and said to his own family, "Hey, I love y'all." He looked at the warden and said, "Let's go." The lethal drugs were then administered. Jones gasped twice, sputtered, gasped 2 more times, and then stopped breathing. He was pronounced dead at 6:42 p.m. Alan Hilzendager's family issued a statement after the execution. They thanked God that this part of the ordeal was over. They said the grief would never end, but they were grateful that the case had reached its conclusion 11 years and 23 days after the murder. Claude Howard Jones was buried in Texas. His accomplice Kerry Dixon remained in prison serving his 60-year sentence. Timothy Jordan served his 10-year sentence and was released. The liquor store in Point Blank did not reopen. The small town continued on, but the murder of Alan Hilzendager remained a part of its history. Story 5. David Dwayne Johnson was born on January 10, 1963, in the state of Arkansas. He was a black male. His exact place of birth within Arkansas is not listed in public court records. Not much is known about his parents or whether he had brothers and sisters. He grew up in Arkansas, and as an adult he lived in and around the city of Little Rock. There are no public records that describe Johnson's childhood in detail. It is not known if he finished high school or if he went to college. What is known is that as a young man, he held jobs to support himself. One of his jobs was working at a seafood restaurant called Lucky's Seafood in Little Rock. He was expected to report for work at either 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. on certain days. He was not known to be violent or aggressive in his daily life before the events that would come later. Johnson had a girlfriend at the time. Her name was Terry Dickerson. They spent time together at her house. Johnson owned a car. It was a low-slung black Oldsmobile Cutlass. He drove this car regularly. He also borrowed cars from other people when he needed to. On some days, he would ask to borrow Terry Dickerson's car. She owned a white Oldsmobile Delta 88. Johnson would sometimes drive her car instead of his own. Johnson had other friends and people he knew in the Little Rock area. One of them was Priscilla Marshall. Another was Connie Manuel. He also knew Connie Manuel's mother, Luella Chavez. He would visit these people at their houses. He sometimes stayed overnight at Connie Manuel's house. He also washed his clothes at her house on occasion. In the days and weeks before September 1989, Johnson behaved in normal ways. He went to work, he visited friends, he drove his car, and he spent time with his girlfriend. Nothing in his early life or background directly showed that he would later commit a serious crime. He had no known history of violent acts that were recorded in public documents. He was simply a man living in Little Rock, working at a seafood restaurant, and moving between the houses of his girlfriend and his friends. There was one small thing that might be noted. Johnson sometimes told people things that were not true. For example, he would say he was in jail when he was not. He would say the police were chasing him when they were not. But these were only words. They did not lead to any arrests or punishments before September 2nd, 1989. His life continued in a normal way up until that point. That is where part 1 ends. Johnson's background and early life were not unusual. He was born in Arkansas in 1963. He grew up, became an adult, got a job at a seafood restaurant, had a girlfriend, owned a black Oldsmobile Cutlass, and visited friends around Little Rock. Nothing in his past pointed clearly to what would happen next. On the morning of September 2nd, 1989, David Dwayne Johnson went to his girlfriend Terry Dickerson's house. It was a Saturday. He told her that his own car was out of gasoline. He asked if he could borrow her car. Terry Dickerson owned a white Oldsmobile Delta 88. She said yes. She loaned him her car. Johnson left her house in the white Oldsmobile sometime before 2:30 p.m. He came back to her house at about 2:30 that afternoon. Then he left again in her car at about 2:45 p.m. He did not tell her exactly where he was going. Later that afternoon, Johnson was supposed to go to work at Lucky's Seafood in Little Rock. His shift started at either 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. He did not show up for work. A few minutes after 7 p.m., he called his manager, Steve Rowell. Johnson told Rowell that he could not come to work because he was in jail. This was not true. Johnson was not in jail. The police were not looking for him at that time. While driving Terry Dickerson's white Oldsmobile, Johnson went to an area in Little Rock where a business called Little Rock Crate and Basket Company was located. The business was at 1623 East 14th Street. That street was a private street owned by the company. The business made wooden crates and baskets for fruits and vegetables. The property had warehouses on both sides of the street, a log yard, and an office area. The whole property was surrounded by a high chain-link fence with barbed wire on top. There was no through traffic because the street was private. At some point, Johnson drove the white Oldsmobile into a drainage ditch beside the private street. The rear wheels of the car got stuck. The wheels spun and the tires smoked. Johnson could not get the car out by himself. At about 6:30 p.m., Dudley Swan arrived at the plant. He was the main stockholder of the company. He had come to get telephone numbers of truck drivers because a customer needed crates delivered. When Swan drove up, he saw the white Oldsmobile stuck in the ditch. He walked over to the car and saw Johnson behind the wheel. Swan told Johnson he was tearing up his car. He asked Johnson to leave and come back the next day to get the car. Swan did not want Johnson on the property after dark. Swan later remembered Johnson's face. Swan then went into the office building. Inside, he saw the night watchman, Leon Brown. Leon Brown was 67 years old. He was a black male. Brown worked as a watchman only on Friday and Saturday nights. He had worked for the company off and on since 1967. He was known as a friendly man who always helped people. That night, Brown was wearing a black leather police belt and holster. He carried a .41 caliber Smith & Wesson pistol. He also carried 4 empty shell casings in the holster, though no one knew why. He also carried a watchman's clock. This was a device that recorded the time when he stopped at certain stations during his rounds. Swan told Leon Brown about the white Oldsmobile and the driver. He said he had asked the driver to leave. Then Swan went into his office to get the telephone numbers. He was in his office for about 15 minutes. When he came out, he went into the lunchroom area. He saw Brown again. Swan asked Brown if the driver had left. Brown motioned toward a pay telephone on the wall. Swan looked and saw Johnson standing there. Johnson was using the pay phone. Swan walked over to Johnson and said, "I thought I asked you to walk on out." Johnson replied, "Yes, sir, I am in just a moment. I need to make 1 or 2 telephone calls to try to find some friends, but they're all at work." Then Leon Brown spoke to Swan. Brown said, "Don't worry about anything. Everything's all right." Brown was being friendly. He was willing to let Johnson use the phone. Swan made a note of the license plate number on the white Oldsmobile. Then he left the building at 6:50 p.m. After Swan left, Johnson stayed inside the warehouse and lunchroom area with Leon Brown. At some point between 6:50 p.m. and 9 p.m., Johnson attacked Leon Brown. Johnson found a piece of wood. It was a 2x4 board. That means a board that was 2 inches thick and 4 inches wide. He used this board as a weapon. He hit Leon Brown on the head with the board. He hit him many times. 3 of the blows were so forceful that they crushed Brown's skull. Part of the skull was pushed into Brown's brain. The brain was crushed. The medical examiner later said that each blow had 300 to 400 pounds of pressure per square inch. The damage was so bad that later, when detectives saw the body, they first thought the victim had been shot in the head. Leon Brown fell face down on the floor. He died where he fell. A large pool of blood formed around his head. His false teeth were knocked 6 feet away from his head. His glasses were found past his feet. The 2x4 board was found near his body. After killing Leon Brown, Johnson started taking things. He went to the lunchroom area. He turned over the vending machines and broke into them. He tore the pay telephone off the wall. He forced open windows that led into the office area. He entered the offices. He opened desk drawers and scattered papers around. He took many items. The items he took included a typewriter, a Sharp brand calculator, 2 cameras, various tools, 3 pistols, a fountain pen, a briefcase, a television set, 3 Motorola brand handheld radios, and a battery charger. He also took Leon Brown's .41 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver from the watchman's holster. Johnson then left the building. He left Leon Brown's body lying face down in the pool of blood. The watchman's clock was not used after 7 p.m. The paper disc inside the clock later showed that Leon Brown did not make his 7 p.m. round. At about 9 p.m. that night, Johnson returned on foot to Terry Dickerson's house. He told her that the police had been chasing him and that he had gotten her car stuck in a ditch. This was not true. The police were not chasing him. He left her house on foot. Later, he came back in his own black low-slung Oldsmobile Cutlass. He brought 3 Motorola handheld radios and a Sharp calculator into her house. These were items he had stolen from the crate company. Later that night, Johnson drove his black car to Priscilla Marshall's house. Terry Dickerson went with him. When they arrived, Johnson took some guns and tools out of his car. He took these items into Priscilla Marshall's house. Among those items was Leon Brown's .41 caliber revolver. At about 10 p.m., Johnson went to Connie Manuel's house. He stayed only a few minutes, then left. He came back to her house between midnight and 1 a.m. on September 3rd. When he returned, he washed his clothes. He also took a bath. The clothes he washed included his tennis shoes. Connie Manuel's mother, Luella Chavez, later gave those clothes to the police. The tennis shoes had human blood on them. There was not enough blood to determine whose blood it was, but it was human blood. Johnson also went to Connie Manuel's house at another time that night to store more stolen items. He had a battery charger, a .38 caliber pistol, a Magnavox television set, more cameras, more tools, a fountain pen, and Leon Brown's .41 caliber revolver. He left these items at Connie Manuel's house. By the morning of September 3rd, 1989, Leon Brown had been dead for several hours. His body was still lying on the floor of the lunchroom area at Little Rock Crate and Basket Company. No one had found him yet. Johnson was still free. He had stolen many items and had hidden them at his girlfriend's house and at other houses. He had washed his bloody clothes. He had told lies about being chased by police and being in jail. On the morning of Sunday, September 3rd, 1989, George Wood arrived at Little Rock Crate and Basket Company. At about 7:15 a.m. George Wood was another part-time watchman. He came to check on Leon Brown, which he usually did. Wood stood outside and called out for Leon Brown. There was no answer. He waited 10 to 15 minutes, thinking Brown might be finishing a round. Brown did not appear. Then Lawrence Sloan arrived. Sloan was scheduled to work the day watch. Wood and Sloan waited about 15 more minutes. Then they decided to go inside the building. The main gate was locked, so they walked around to one of the doors that had been left open the night before to cool the building. They entered the building and went into the lunchroom area. That was the same area where Dudley Swan had last seen Johnson and Leon Brown together. There they saw Leon Brown's body lying face down in a large pool of blood. Lawrence Sloan saw the body and said out loud, "Ooh, somebody done beat Leon's brains out." The 2x4 board was lying near the body. The vending machines were turned over and broken. The pay telephone was torn off the wall. The windows into the offices were forced open. Wood and Sloan called the police immediately. The police responded quickly. They arrived at the scene and began their investigation. The first thing they saw was that Leon Brown had been beaten to death. The medical examiner later determined that the blows to the head had crushed the skull and pushed bone into the brain. The damage was so severe that experienced detectives at the scene first thought the victim had been shot. The police looked around the property. They saw a white Oldsmobile Delta 88 still stuck in the drainage ditch beside the private street. The police assigned one officer, Todd Vint, to watch that car. They wanted to see who would come back for it. At about 11 a.m. that same morning, a blue and white pickup truck stopped beside the white Oldsmobile. 3 people got out of the pickup. They were Terry Dickerson, her father Elmer Richardson, and David Dwayne Johnson. They started trying to get the white Oldsmobile out of the ditch. Dudley Swan happened to see them. He went to Officer Todd Vint and told him that Johnson was the same man he had seen driving the white car the night before and later inside the building using the pay phone. The police arrested Johnson at that moment. He was taken into custody. The arrest happened around 11 a.m. on September 3rd, 1989. Johnson had been free for about 14 hours after killing Leon Brown. After the arrest, the police continued their investigation. They talked to witnesses. Steve Rowell, Johnson's manager at Lucky's Seafood, told police that Johnson had called him at a few minutes after 7 p.m. on September 2nd and said he was in jail. Police confirmed Johnson was not in jail at that time. Robert Sanders told police he saw a low-slung black car parked in front of the crate company a little after 9 p.m. on September 2nd. that matched the description of Johnson's own black Oldsmobile Cutlass. The police then went to Terry Dickerson's house. They found the 3 Motorola handheld radios and the Sharp calculator that Johnson had brought there. These items were identified as property taken from Little Rock Crate and Basket Company. The police then went to Priscilla Marshall's house. There they recovered a battery charger, a .38 caliber pistol, a Magnavox television set, cameras, tools, a fountain pen, and Leon Brown's own .41 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver. Each of these items was also identified as stolen from the Crate Company. The police also went to Connie Manuel's house. Connie Manuel told police that Johnson had come to her house at about 10 p.m. on September 2nd, then returned between midnight and 1 a.m. on September 3rd. He washed his clothes and took a bath. Her mother, Luella Chavez, gave Johnson's washed clothes to the police. That included his tennis shoes. Forensic testing found human blood on the tennis shoes. There was not enough blood to determine a match, but it was confirmed to be human blood. Police officers also collected physical evidence from the crime scene. Officer Jack Matlock found one of Johnson's palm prints on the coin box that had been ripped out of the soft drink vending machine in the lunchroom area. He also found one of Johnson's fingerprints on the inside of an office window. Both prints were positively identified as belonging to David Dwayne Johnson. The police also examined the 2x4 board that was found near Leon Brown's body. Hair samples found on the board were tested. Those hair samples were compatible with the hair of Leon Brown. The paper disc from Leon Brown's Watchman clock was also examined. The disc showed that Brown did not make his 7 p.m. round on September 2nd. This proved that Brown was already dead or unable to make his rounds by that time. Johnson was formally charged with capital murder. His trial took place in 1990. During the trial, the prosecution presented all of the evidence: the fingerprints, the palm print, the stolen property found at Terry Dickerson's house and Priscilla Marshall's house, the hair samples, the bloody tennis shoes, the witness testimony from Dudley Swan, and the fact that Johnson had lied about being in jail. Johnson did not testify in his own defense at the guilt phase of the trial. His defense called 2 witnesses. One said Johnson had phoned her at 5 o'clock or 5:30 p.m. on September 2nd. Another witness, a public defender, said a detective told him Johnson might not have committed the crime alone. The detective denied making that statement. The jury listened to all the testimony. They found Johnson guilty of capital murder. The jury's decision was unanimous. Then the trial moved to the punishment phase. The jury had to decide if Johnson would get life in prison or the death penalty. They looked for aggravating circumstances, reasons to impose death, and mitigating circumstances, reasons to impose a lesser sentence. The jury found one aggravating circumstance. The murder was committed for pecuniary gain, which means Johnson killed Leon Brown to steal money or property. The jury found one mitigating circumstance. Johnson was a model prisoner and could conform to prison life and be a productive member of the prison society. The jury weighed the two against each other. They decided that the aggravating circumstance outweighed the mitigating circumstance. They unanimously voted for the death penalty. Johnson was sentenced to death by lethal injection. The sentence was given in November 1990. After the trial, Johnson began filing appeals. He argued that his first lawyer during the trial was incompetent. He said the lawyer had manic depressive illness and was mentally ill during the trial. He also said the lawyer did not push hard enough to admit certain testimony and behaved unprofessionally during jury selection. Johnson's appeals went through the Arkansas state courts and then to federal courts. The Arkansas Supreme Court affirmed his conviction and sentence in 1992 and again in 1995. The U.S. Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals reviewed his claims in 2000. The court admitted that Johnson's first lawyer might have been mentally ill and did not perform perfectly. However, The court wrote that the governing law requires that this conviction and sentence be upheld. The court said Johnson had failed to show that the outcome would have been different even if his lawyer had acted perfectly. The U.S. Supreme Court also reviewed the case and denied Johnson's appeal. Johnson then asked Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee for clemency, which means mercy or a reduced sentence. Governor Huckabee reviewed the files and denied the request on December 19, 2000. The governor also noted that delaying the execution until after the holidays would set it closer to Johnson's birthday on January 10th. On the evening of December 19, 2000, David Dwayne Johnson was executed by lethal injection at the Cummins Unit Prison in Varner, Arkansas. He was 37 years old. He was asked if he had any last words. He kept his eyes closed and gave a small shake of his head. He made no final statement. The lethal drugs were administered. He was pronounced dead at 9:11 p.m., 10 minutes after the injection began. Leon Brown's two sons lived out of state. Neither attended the execution. Leon Brown had been a retiree who worked weekends as a security guard. He was described by co-workers as a congenial man who always went out of his way to help people. A fellow guard once warned Brown that his good nature was going to get him in trouble. That warning came true when David Dwayne Johnson asked to use a telephone and Brown said yes. The story of David Dwayne Johnson ends with his execution on December 19, 2000, and the memory of Leon Brown, a kind watchman who was killed while trying to help a stranger who asked to use a phone. Story 6. Jack Wade Clark was born on July 29, 1963. He was a white male. He grew up in Texas, but very little is known about his very early childhood. He did not come from a famous or wealthy family. His life was marked by trouble from a young age. As a young man, Jack joined the United States Navy. He did not stay in the Navy for long. He deserted from the Navy. That means he left without permission and did not finish his required service. After leaving the Navy without approval, he later joined the United States Army. The same thing happened again. He deserted from the Army as well. He walked away from his military duties a second time. After leaving the military, Jack's behavior became more aggressive and dangerous. He did not hold a steady job for a long time. He moved from place to place. He had trouble controlling his anger. He also had problems with women and with authority figures. At some point, Jack committed an assault and an attempted rape against a relative. The facts show that he tried to rape a family member. He also physically attacked that same relative. This happened before the crime he was later executed for. The relative was able to survive and escape. But this event showed that Jack was willing to use force and violence against a woman he knew. Jack also had children. He did not take good care of them. He neglected them. He did not give them the proper food, clothing, or attention they needed. He also abused them. He would act in a harmful way toward his own children. Because of this, Children's Protective Services workers became involved. These are government workers who try to protect children from harm. Jack did not like their involvement. He threatened these workers. He acted in a hostile and intimidating way toward them. Jack also threatened other people in his daily life. He threatened his landlord. He threatened a young boy who lived in his neighborhood. He also acted in an assaultive way toward his neighbors. He would intimidate them and make them feel afraid. Many people who lived near him did not feel safe. Jack had a habit of making weapons for himself. Even when he was put in jail for other offenses before the main crime, he made sharp weapons called shanks from everyday objects. He used these weapons to try to fight with other inmates. He also tried to intimidate the guards who worked in the jail. He would fight with other prisoners as well. He did not follow rules. At times, Jack pretended to have mental illness. When he was in jail, he would act as if he was crazy or thinking about suicide. He would say he wanted to kill himself. but later it became clear that he was faking these feelings. He was not truly mentally ill. He was trying to trick the people in charge so that they would treat him differently. All of these events happened before October 1989. Jack Wade Clark was a man who had already deserted the military, attacked a relative, threatened many people, neglected and abused his own children, and behaved violently in jail. He had a pattern of using threats, weapons, and physical force. He also tried to lie about his mental state to gain an advantage. His life up to this point was full of broken rules, broken relationships, and harm to others. On October 15, 1989, Jack Wade Clark was 26 years old. He was living in or near Lubbock, Texas. He did not plan the crime days in advance. The opportunity came to him suddenly. In the very early morning hours of October 15, 1989, a woman named Melissa and Garcia was using a public telephone. She was 23 years old. She was Hispanic. She lived in Slayton, Texas, which is near Lubbock. She had gone to a telephone booth on a street. She was making a phone call. Jack Clark saw Melissa standing at the telephone booth. He walked toward her. He asked her for a light for his cigarette. That was a trick. He did not actually need a light. He used this question as a way to get close to her without scaring her. After asking for the light, Clark walked around a corner. He waited there. He hid from view. He did not leave the area. He waited for Melissa to finish her phone call. When Melissa finished her call, she walked away from the telephone booth. As she passed by where Clark was hiding, he came out. He had a knife in his hand. He stabbed her in the shoulder. This was the first wound. The stab to the shoulder hurt her, but did not kill her right away. After stabbing her in the shoulder, Clark forced Melissa into her own car. He used the knife and his physical strength to make her get inside. He did not let her go. He took control of her vehicle. He drove the car away from the telephone booth. He drove to an isolated area. The location was near East 40th Street and Southeast Drive in Lubbock. It was a vacant lot with tall weeds. There was also a concrete wall there. It was hidden from view. Once they arrived at that isolated place, Clark sexually assaulted Melissa. He raped her. He did this more than once. The facts say he raped her repeatedly. Melissa was in a semi-conscious state during the rape. She had lost a lot of blood from the stab wound to her shoulder. She was weak and fading in and out of awareness. She could not fight back. After the rape, Clark was not finished. He took the same knife. He stabbed Melissa in the heart. He stabbed her twice through the heart. These wounds were fatal. She died very soon after. Clark then got back into Melissa's car. He drove the car away from the isolated lot. He parked the car about 1 block away from his own home. He did not leave the car at the murder scene. He moved it closer to where he lived. After parking the car, Clark cleaned the knife he had used. He wanted to remove any blood or other evidence. Then he hid the knife in an attic. He also ground down the knife. He used a grinding tool to change the shape of the blade. He did this so that the knife could not be identified as the murder weapon. The original marks on the blade were gone after he ground it down. About 12 hours after the murder, Clark did something unusual. He called the police. He told them he had seen a body in a vacant lot. He said he was driving and made a U-turn on a highway. While making that U-turn, he claimed he spotted a body in some tall weeds. He gave the police the location. Clark thought this would make him look like a helpful citizen. He thought the police would thank him and leave him alone. But the way he described the scene was too detailed. He described exactly where the body was hidden behind the concrete wall and weeds. A normal person driving past would not have seen that body unless they already knew it was there. The police took note of this. They did not arrest him yet, but they started to watch him closely. They believed he knew more than he should have known. For about 1 week after the murder, the police paid attention to Clark. They did not confront him right away. They gathered information. Clark noticed that the police were watching him. Then Clark took another action. He called a detective named Ray Martinez. Clark said these words over the phone. "This is Jack. Y'all can come get me, but you better be ready to kill me." The detective asked why. Clark answered, "Because I killed that girl." The police did not go to arrest him immediately. Instead, they set up surveillance at his workplace. They watched him from a distance. Clark came out of his job and drove away in a van. The police followed him. Clark led them directly to the murder scene. He showed them where he had killed Melissa. When Clark got out of the van, he was holding the knife again. He waved it at the officers. The police drew their guns. Clark then surrendered. He did not try to stab the officers. He gave up. After he was taken into custody, Clark gave a written confession to the police. In that confession, he explained everything he had done, asking for a light, waiting, stabbing her in the shoulder, forcing her into her car, driving to the isolated area, raping her, and stabbing her in the heart. He also explained how he had ground down the knife and hidden it in the attic. The police later found the knife exactly where he said it was. The knife showed signs of recent grinding. While Clark was in the Lubbock County Jail waiting for his trial, he bragged to another inmate. He told that inmate exactly what he had done. He described how he asked the victim for a lighter, stabbed her, forced her into the car, drove her somewhere, raped her, and then stabbed her again so she could not identify him. He also said he ground the knife down. This inmate later came forward with the information. At the time of the crime, and during Clark's time in jail, the police and prosecutors did not yet have DNA testing. That technology was not used in this case until many years later. But they had his confession. They had the knife. They had the jailhouse witness. They had the way Clark led them to the body. They had his phone call to the detective. The victim, Melissa Garcia, was a good person who helped others. She was loved by her family and friends. She had already suffered a terrible loss. 1 year before she was killed, her grandmother, Elizabeth Alvarado, was murdered. A man named Adolf Gil Hernandez had beaten Elizabeth Alvarado to death during a robbery. Melissa's family was still grieving that murder when Melissa was taken from them as well. Melissa's body was found in the tall weeds behind the concrete wall, exactly where Clark had led the police. The medical examiner later confirmed 2 stab wounds, 1 to the shoulder and 2 through the heart. The examiner also found evidence of sexual assault, including trauma to the vaginal area, swelling, cuts, and bruises. After Jack Wade Clark confessed to the police and was arrested, the case moved to the formal investigation and trial. The police already had his written confession. They had the knife he used. They had the testimony of the inmate from the Lubbock County Jail who heard Clark brag about the rape and murder. That witness came forward about 6 weeks after he was released from jail. He did not receive any special benefit for testifying. He simply told the jury what Clark had said. The trial took place in Lubbock County, Texas. The prosecutor was named Bill Souter. An assistant prosecutor named Rebecca Atchley also worked on the case. Clark was charged with capital murder. The state of Texas argued that he kidnapped, raped, and then murdered Melissa Garcia. Under Texas law, murder committed during a kidnapping or a sexual assault can be punished by death. During the trial, the medical examiner testified. He showed the jury the 2 stab wounds to the heart and the stab wound to the shoulder. He also showed the injuries from the sexual assault. The knife was presented as evidence. Experts showed that the knife had been ground down recently, just as Clark had said in his confession. The jury also heard about Clark's past behavior. They learned that he had deserted from the Navy and the Army. They learned about the assault and attempted rape of a relative. They learned about his threats to Children's Protective Services workers. They learned about his neglect and abuse of his own children. They learned about his threats to his landlord, a neighborhood boy, and his neighbors. They learned about his behavior in jail, faking mental illness, making shanks, intimidating guards, and fighting with other inmates. The jury found Jack Wade Clark guilty of capital murder. On February 21st, 1991, he was sentenced to death. The punishment was lethal injection. After the sentence, Clark did not give up. He began a long series of appeals. He first appealed to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. That court rejected his appeal in 1994. The case number was Clark v. State, 881S.W.2D682. He then asked the United States Supreme Court to hear his case. The Supreme Court refused in 1995. Clark continued to fight. He filed a federal appeal. The United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit reviewed his case. That court also rejected his appeal in 2000. The case number was Clark v. Johnson, 202F.3D760. In total, 8 different courts reviewed his appeals. All of them rejected his claims. The United States Supreme Court reviewed his case one more time and rejected it as well. While Clark was on death row, he changed his story. He claimed that he was innocent. He said his signed confession was not sincere. He said he signed it out of frustration because he wanted a way out. He said he did not rape or kill Melissa Garcia. The state of Texas decided to perform DNA tests. At the time of the trial in 1991, DNA testing was not available or not used. But now the technology existed. The prosecutors agreed to send the evidence to the Department of Public Safety Crime Lab. They did this voluntarily. They did not have to do it. But they wanted to be certain. The DNA tests came back. The results confirmed that Jack Wade Clark had raped Melissa Garcia. The DNA matched him to the crime scene. Clark still did not admit guilt. He changed his story again. He said the evidence was planted. He said someone put his DNA at the scene on purpose to frame him. No evidence supported this claim. In late 2000, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles reviewed Clark's case. They considered whether to recommend clemency to the governor. They decided not to recommend clemency. The new governor of Texas was Rick Perry. He had just taken office after George W. Bush resigned to become president. Governor Perry rejected Clark's request for clemency. This cleared the way for the execution. On January 9, 2001, Jack Wade Clark was taken to the death chamber in Huntsville, Texas. He was 37 years old. He was strapped to a gurney. 5 members of Melissa Garcia's family watched from behind a window. Clark spoke his last words. He said he was sorry to the family. He asked for their forgiveness. He invited everyone to attend his funeral mass. He quoted a Bible verse, "And he was the light that shineth in the hearts of all men from the foundations of the world. If we confess our sins, he is just and true to forgive us of our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness." Peace and goodness. Then the lethal drugs were injected. Clark sputtered and gasped slightly. He closed his eyes. At 6:27 p.m., he was pronounced dead. The execution took 9 minutes from the start of the drugs. It was the first execution in Texas in 2001 and the first execution under Governor Rick Perry. After the execution, Melissa Garcia's mother, Mary Jane Garcia, spoke to reporters. She said she did not believe Clark's apology was sincere, but she said witnessing his death made her feel better. She said she needed to be there because of what he did to her daughter. She also said she planned to witness the execution of Adolph Gil Hernandez the next month. Hernandez was the man who murdered her mother, Melissa's grandmother, 1 year before Melissa was killed. Adolph Gil Hernandez was executed on February 8, 2001. Mary Jane Garcia said that after both executions, 2 chapters in her life would be closed. She said she had been waiting for 12 years. She said once it was over, she would never remember the killers' names again. The case of Jack Wade Clark ended on January 9, 2001, at 6:27 p.m., when he took his last breath and the state of Texas completed his sentence. Story 7. Eddie Leroy Trice was born on March 27, 1952. His mother was Viola Gross. She was only 14 years old when she became pregnant with Eddie. She did not become pregnant by choice. A man named Walter Trice raped her. At that time, Viola did not fully understand what had happened to her because she was so young. She did not know what sexual intercourse was. 9 months after the rape, Eddie Leroy Trice was born. After Eddie was born, his mother had 7 more children. These children came from 4 different fathers. The family did not have a stable home life. Money was often short. Food was sometimes hard to get. One of the men who married Viola was very violent. This stepfather treated Eddie badly from a young age. The abuse from the stepfather was extreme. On one occasion, the stepfather beat Eddie so hard that Eddie lost consciousness. After he passed out, no one took him to see a doctor. He did not receive any medical treatment. On another occasion, the stepfather tried to kill Eddie. He forced Eddie's head into a hot oven. He held it there. Eddie survived, but the abuse did not stop. The stepfather also kept food away from the family. Eddie often went hungry. Because of the violence at home, Eddie had trouble in school. He could not read. He could not write. He could not understand what the teacher was saying to him. His body also caused him pain. He had severe cramps and was diagnosed with arthritis. Learning was very hard for him. Later in life, tests showed that his IQ was 79. A score of 79 is in the range of borderline mental retardation. This meant he thought more slowly than most people his age. Eddie also suffered many head injuries as a child. One of these injuries happened in a car accident. His head hit the windshield of the car. The impact damaged his brain. These head injuries happened more than once. Over time, the damage to his brain became chronic, meaning it did not go away and affected him for the rest of his life. When Eddie was still a young boy, adults sexually abused him. This happened more than once. A neighbor abused him. One of his uncles abused him. A Catholic priest also abused him. These were different people at different times. Each time, Eddie was a child who could not protect himself. Because of all the pain and confusion, Eddie started drinking alcohol when he was only 9 years old. By the time he was 12, he was drinking very large amounts. He would drink 1 gallon of whiskey every 3 days. When he reached the age of 15, he was drinking almost all day long. Alcohol became a way to escape from his memories and his daily suffering. At age 15, Eddie tried to kill himself. He did not succeed. That same year, he was put into a county jail. He was still a teenager. While he was in that adult jail, he was raped again. This added more trauma to his already damaged mind. Eddie did not receive help for any of these problems. No one treated him for the abuse. No one treated him for the head injuries. No one taught him to read or write. No one stopped the drinking. By the time he became a young man, his brain was injured, his body was damaged, and his mind carried the weight of years of violence and sexual abuse. Eddie Leroy Trice was now an adult. He lived in an apartment in Oklahoma City. On Friday, February 13, 1987, he spent most of the day drinking alcohol. He was with his roommate, Archie Landon, and Archie's brother, Walter Landon. The 3 men drank together for many hours. Around 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the evening, Eddie and Archie returned to their apartment. Archie was very tired from drinking. He lay down on the couch and fell asleep. Eddie was still awake. Archie did not see Eddie again until the next morning. Later that night, Eddie left the apartment. He got into his car and drove to a house. The house was located at 1613 Northeast 24th Street in Oklahoma City. Eddie parked his car 1 block away from the house. He did not want anyone to see his car near the house. Eddie walked to the house. He went to the northwest side of the house. There was a bedroom window there. He opened the window and climbed inside. This was a crime called burglary. He had entered someone else's home without permission. The house belonged to an 84-year-old woman named Ernestine Jones. She was very small. She was only 5 feet and 1 inch tall. She weighed only 105 pounds. She lived in the house with her son, Emmanuel Jones. Emmanuel was 63 years old. He was mentally retarded, which meant he had trouble understanding things and taking care of himself. Once Eddie was inside the house, he attacked Ernestine Jones. He used a weapon called nunchucks. Nunchucks are made of 2 pieces of wood connected by a string or a chain. Martial arts fighters use them. Eddie beat Ernestine with the nunchucks. He struck her many times. He hit her in the head. He hit her in the face. He hit her in the chest. He did not stop. After beating her, Eddie raped Ernestine Jones. She was 84 years old. She could not fight back. Her body was weak. She was in pain from the beating. But Eddie did not care. Emmanuel Jones heard the attack. He tried to help his mother. He came toward Eddie. Eddie then attacked Emmanuel. He did not use the nunchucks this time. He found a hammer. He beat Emmanuel with the hammer. He hit Emmanuel in the face. The hammer punctured Emmanuel's right eye. It broke the bones in his right cheek. Eddie also hit Emmanuel's right arm. The arm bone broke. While Emmanuel was on the ground, hurt and bleeding, Eddie took money. He found approximately $500 in cash. The money belonged to Emmanuel. Eddie took all of it. Before leaving, Eddie threatened Emmanuel. He told Emmanuel that if he told anyone what had happened, Eddie would come back and kill him. Emmanuel was scared. He was in pain. He could barely see because of his injured eye. He did not know if he would survive. Eddie left the Jones house. He went back to his apartment. When he got there, Archie Landon was awake. Eddie had a lot of money with him. He told Archie that he had used his nunchucks to whip a homosexual man. Then Eddie and Archie used the stolen money to buy drugs. They took narcotics together. They also drank more wine. Back at the Jones house, Ernestine was still alive. The autopsy later showed that she survived for several hours after the attack. But she was badly hurt. Her eye socket was broken. Her upper jaw was broken. Her lower jaw was broken. Her neck was injured. Her rib cage was crushed. Her heart and lungs were bruised on the inside. 2 of her fingers were broken. She had many bruises and scratches in her genital area from the rape. She was in terrible pain. She could not call for help. She could not get up. She lay in her house and died from all the blunt force injuries to her head, neck, and chest. After Eddie Trice returned to his apartment, his roommate Archie Landon saw that he had a lot of money. Eddie also talked about whipping a homosexual man with his nunchucks. Archie became suspicious. He thought about what Eddie had said and what he had seen. He decided to call the police. Archie told the police that Eddie had come home with a large amount of cash. He also told them that Eddie had hidden his bloody clothes in a nearby abandoned house. The police took this information seriously. They began to investigate. On February 17, 1987, 4 days after the murder, the police arrested Eddie Trice. Once he was in custody, detectives questioned him. One of the detectives was named Eric Mullenix. During the questioning, Eddie confessed to the crime. He told the detectives what he had done to Ernestine Jones and to Emmanuel Jones. The police also found Eddie's bloody clothes in the abandoned house, just as Archie had said. They tested the blood on the clothes. The blood type matched Ernestine Jones's blood type. This was physical evidence that connected Eddie to the crime. Emmanuel Jones survived the attack. He was able to speak to the police. He identified Eddie Trice as the man who had broken into the house, beaten him with a hammer, and hurt his mother. Emmanuel's identification was important because he had seen Eddie's face during the attack. The case went to trial in the District Court of Oklahoma County. The trial started on June 8, 1987. Judge William Burkett presided over the case. A jury was selected to hear the evidence. The prosecutor was Robert Macy, the district attorney for Oklahoma County. The jury listened to the evidence. They heard about the confession. They heard about the bloody clothes. They heard from Emmanuel Jones. They heard about the injuries to Ernestine Jones. On June 11, 1987, after 3 days of trial, the jury found Eddie Trice guilty of first-degree murder, first-degree rape, first-degree burglary, and assault with a dangerous weapon. After the guilty verdict, the same jury had to decide the punishment. The prosecutor asked for the death penalty. He told the jury that there were several reasons, called aggravating factors, that made the death penalty appropriate. The jury found 4 of these factors to be true. First, Eddie Trice had a previous felony conviction that involved violence. Second, during the crime he knowingly created a great risk of death to more than one person. Third, the murder was heinous, atrocious, and cruel. Fourth, Eddie Trice was a continuing threat to society. The jury also heard about Eddie's difficult childhood, his low IQ, his substance abuse, and his brain damage. These were called mitigating factors, but the jury decided that the aggravating factors were stronger than the mitigating factors. On June 12, 1987, the jury recommended the death penalty by lethal injection. The judge agreed with the recommendation and sentenced Eddie Trice to death. Eddie Trice did not accept the sentence. He filed appeals to try to change the outcome. He appealed to the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals. That court upheld his conviction and death sentence in 1993. He then asked the United States Supreme Court to hear his case, but the Supreme Court refused in December 1993. Trice filed more appeals. He asked for post-conviction relief, which is a way to argue that his trial lawyer did not do a good job. The court denied this request in 1994, and the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals agreed with that denial in 1996. He then took his case to the federal courts. He filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus, which asks a federal court to review a state conviction. The United States District Court refused to give him relief. He appealed to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. In November 1999, the 10th Circuit also ruled against him. In 2000, Eddie Trice asked the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board for clemency. Clemency means mercy. He asked them to change his death sentence to life in prison. On November 2, 2000, the board held a hearing. His lawyer and a psychologist spoke about his abuse, his head injuries, and his low IQ. 4 of his relatives spoke on his behalf. But the board voted 4-0 to deny clemency. No one voted to spare his life. With all appeals exhausted and clemency denied, the state of Oklahoma set an execution date. On January 9, 2001, Eddie Leroy Trice was taken to the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. At 9:15 p.m., he was given a lethal injection. He was pronounced dead. He was 48 years old. Ernestine Jones's family members witnessed the execution. Her son Elmer Jones and her daughter Velma Harris were there. Emmanuel Jones, the son who had been beaten with a hammer, did not witness the execution because he had already died sometime after the attack. He is buried next to his mother. Eddie Leroy Trice was the 685th person executed in the United States since 1976 and the 31st person executed in Oklahoma since that year. His body was taken away, and the case was closed. Story 8. Robert Dewey Glock II was born on May 22, 1961. He was born in a city called Gary, which is in the state of Indiana. His mother's name was Patricia. His father's name was Robert Dewey Glock I. His parents were not married to each other at the time of his birth. Robert, who was called Bobby by his family, had a sister named Tammy. Tammy was younger than him. The 2 children lived with their mother for most of their early years. Their father was not living in the same home. From a very young age, Robert's life was hard. His mother drank alcohol heavily. She was an alcoholic. Tammy later said that their mother spent most of her time drunk. When their mother would vomit on herself from drinking too much, Robert and Tammy would clean her up. They would put her to bed. They did this because they were scared. If they did not help her, she would become furious with them. She would beat them. Robert's mother was also abusive in other ways. She would dress Robert up like a little girl. She made him go to school dressed as a girl. Robert tried to sneak normal clothes out of the house with him, but if his mother caught him, she would beat him badly. His mother did not approve of who Robert was. She did not like him because of who his father was. Robert was not allowed to play with other children his age. He was kept away from his peers. He tried to run away from home several times because the situation was so bad. Each time he was brought back. When Robert was 13 years old, he was sent to a foster home. The state took him away from his mother because she could not take care of him properly. He lived in the foster home for about 1 year. After that year, Robert moved to Florida. He went to live with his father. His father lived in the state of Florida. Robert hoped that life with his father would be better, but living with his father was also difficult. Robert's father had a new wife. This was Robert's stepmother. The stepmother was jealous of Robert. She saw him as a danger to her own children's place in the family. Robert wanted his stepmother to like him and care for him, but instead she was violent toward him. She would hit him and hurt him. Because of all this treatment, Robert never learned to feel good about himself. He did not develop a healthy self-esteem. He became a person who showed self-defeating traits. He also showed schizoid traits, which meant he had trouble connecting with other people in a normal way. He suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. This is a condition where a person has severe anxiety and bad memories from past trauma. Robert was small for his age. He was not big or strong. He became very dependent on other people. He wanted people to like him. He would do things to please others if they made him feel comfortable. He was easy to lead. He was a follower, not a leader. Robert went to school in Florida. He did not have many friends. He did not have a job that was notable during his teenage years. He did not commit any serious crimes as a child or young teenager. His life was mostly about surviving each day at home. When Robert became a young adult, he still lived in Florida. He had no significant history of criminal activity at this point in his life. He was quiet. He was passive. He was still looking for someone who would accept him and make him feel safe. One day, Robert met a man named Carl Pugliati. Carl was a few years older than Robert. Carl was confident and talked a lot. Robert felt comfortable around Carl. Carl seemed to like Robert. Robert began to spend time with Carl. Robert wanted Carl's approval. Robert did not know that this friendship would lead him into terrible trouble. Robert Glock and Carl Pugliati became friends. Carl was the type of person who took charge. Robert was the type of person who followed. Robert wanted Carl to like him. So when Carl suggested things, Robert agreed. On August 16, 1983, Robert was 22 years old. Carl was 21. They were together in Bradenton, Florida. Bradenton is in Manatee County on the west coast of Florida. The two men did not have much money. They decided they wanted money. They decided they would take money from someone by force. That day, they went to a shopping mall called DeSoto Square Mall. The mall had a large parking lot. People came and went to buy things. Robert and Carl waited in the parking lot. They watched people. They looked for someone who seemed alone and easy to target. They had a handgun with them. It was a .38 caliber Colt revolver. Robert was carrying the gun. At some point, a woman named Sherilyn Ritchie drove into the parking lot. She was 34 years old. She was a white female. She worked as a home economics teacher at Palmetto High School in Manatee County. She had taken a year off from teaching to have a baby with her husband. Her husband's name was Larry. Larry was a baseball coach at the same school. Sherilyn had a baby at home. She had gone to the mall to shop. Sherilyn parked her car. She got out of the driver's seat. As she stepped out, Robert and Carl approached her. Robert pointed the handgun at her. He told her to get back into her car. Sherilyn was scared. She did what she was told. Robert got into the driver's seat of Sherilyn's car. Carl sat in the passenger seat. Sherilyn sat in the back seat. Robert drove the car away from them all. Carl stayed in the front seat. Carl was now in control of Sherilyn's purse and belongings. First, they stole Sherilyn's wedding ring. She was wearing it. They forced her to take the ring off. They took the ring and kept it. Sherilyn was very upset about losing her wedding ring. Next, they drove to a bank. They forced Sherilyn to use an ATM machine. These machines allowed people to take money from their bank accounts. Sherilyn had to enter her code. She had to withdraw money. She took out $100. She gave the money to Robert and Carl. Sherilyn begged them for two things. She asked them to let her keep her wedding ring, but they had already taken it. Then she asked for something else. She asked for her husband's baseball mitt. The mitt was in the car. She used to go to the baseball games her husband coached. The mitt meant a lot to her. Robert and Carl agreed to give her the mitt. After getting the money, they did not let Sherilyn go. Instead, Robert drove the car north. He drove about 60 miles. They left Manatee County and went into Pasco County. They drove until they reached an area near a town called Dade City. Dade City is in Pasco County. There were orange groves there. The land was open and had many trees. Robert stopped the car near an orange grove. They told Sherilyn to get out. They gave her a sun visor from the car. They gave her her purse. They also gave her the baseball mitt she had asked for. Sherilyn took these items. She got out of the car. She stood in the orange grove. Robert and Carl started to drive away. They left Sherilyn standing there. She thought she had been released. She thought she was safe. But after driving a short distance, Robert and Carl talked to each other. They realized something. Sherilyn had seen their faces. She could identify them to the police. They decided they could not let her live. They decided to kill her. They turned the car around. They drove back to where Sherilyn was standing. She was still there. She had not run far. Robert or Carl? Accounts later confirmed that Carl shot first, fired the handgun at Sherilyn. Carl shot her twice. The bullets hit her. She fell to the ground. She was hurt badly, but she was not dead yet. Robert and Carl drove away a second time. They thought she would die, but as they drove, they looked back. They saw that Sherilyn was still moving. She was trying to get up. She was still alive. So they turned the car around again. They drove back to her a second time. This time, Robert took the gun. He shot Sherilyn. He fired one shot. She was hit again. She fell back down, but she was still moving. They drove away a third time. Then they came back a third time. Robert shot Sherilyn again. He fired one more shot. After this shot, Sherilyn stopped moving. She was dead. Later, investigators found that Sherilyn had managed to walk about 10 yards from where she was first shot. She had tried to escape, but she collapsed for the last time. When she fell, she was still clutching her husband's baseball mitt to her chest. She held on to it even as she died. Robert and Carl took Sherilyn's car. They drove away from the orange grove. They had stolen her wedding ring. They had taken her $100. They had used her car to commit the crimes. They left her body in the grove. Robert did not tell anyone what he had done. He did not go to the police. He stayed with Carl. They drove north. They left Florida. They drove through several states. They kept Sherilyn's car. They kept the handgun. At this time, no one yet knew what had happened to Sherilyn Ritchie. Her family waited for her to come home. She did not come home. Her husband reported her missing, but the police did not yet know who had taken her or where she was. Sherilyn Ritchie's body was found in the orange grove near Dade City, Florida. Someone discovered her lying on the ground. She was still holding her husband's baseball mitt against her chest. The police were called. They came to the scene. They saw that she had been shot multiple times. They began to investigate who had killed her. At first, the police did not have many clues. They did not know who had taken Sherilyn from the mall parking lot. They did not know who had forced her to withdraw money. They did not know who had driven her car to Pasco County. The investigation moved slowly. But 5 days after the murder, something happened far away from Florida. On August 21st, 1983, a New Jersey state trooper was on duty. The trooper's name was William Moore. He was driving on the New Jersey Turnpike, which is a major highway. He saw a car in front of him. He could not read the license plate on the car. The plate was not clear. Under New Jersey law, a car must have a readable license plate. So Trooper Moore decided to pull the car over. The car stopped. Inside the car were two men. One was Robert Glock. The other was Carl Pugliati. They were driving Sherilyn's car. They had not changed the license plates. They had not hidden the car. Trooper Moore did not know at first that the car belonged to a murdered woman. He only knew that the license plate was not readable. Trooper Moore asked the men for identification. He asked them about the car. The men gave answers. But something made the trooper suspicious. He looked more closely. He found that the car was reported as connected to a missing person. He did not know yet that Sherilyn was dead, but he knew something was wrong. The trooper arrested Robert Glock and Carl Pugliati. They were taken to a police station in New Jersey. At the station, the police questioned them. Robert and Carl both confessed. They told the police everything that had happened. They admitted to kidnapping Sherilyn. They admitted to robbing her of her wedding ring and money. They admitted to driving her to the Orange Grove. They admitted to shooting her. They admitted that they had come back multiple times to shoot her again. The police found the handgun. It was a .38 caliber Colt revolver. They also found Sherilyn's wedding ring. They found the $100. The evidence matched what the men said in their confessions. Robert Glock and Carl Pugliati were brought back to Florida. They were charged with murder, kidnapping, and robbery. The trial was held in Pasco County. The judge's name was Wayne Cobb. Robert and Carl were tried together. Robert's lawyers had asked for separate trials, but the request was denied. The trial took place. The jury heard the confessions. They heard about the ATM withdrawal. They heard about the wedding ring. They heard how Sherilyn had begged for her husband's baseball mitt and how she died holding it. The evidence was very clear. Both men were found guilty. On May 4th, 1984, Judge Wayne Cobb sentenced Robert Glock to death. Carl Pugliati was also sentenced to death. The sentence for Robert was to be executed in the electric chair. That was Florida's method of execution at the time. Robert did not die right away. He began to appeal his sentence. He filed many appeals over many years. His lawyers argued different things. One argument was that the jury instructions at his trial were not correct under the Constitution. Another argument was that the New Jersey state trooper had stopped the car illegally. His lawyer said the trooper used racial profiling. The trooper was targeting people who looked Italian because of a belief that Italians were involved in organized crime. Carl Pugliati was Italian American. Robert's lawyer said the stop was illegal, so the confessions and evidence should not have been used. The courts rejected this argument. The stop was legal because the license plate was unreadable. Robert spent almost 17 years on death row. During that time, Florida changed its execution method from the electric chair to lethal injection. Robert was allowed to choose his method of execution. He chose lethal injection. In September 2000, Robert married a woman named Sheila. She was a steel worker from Gary, Indiana. She was 45 years old. They had met through an internet service that connected people with death row inmates. They had been writing letters for about 5 years. In December 2000, Robert was scheduled to be executed. But the Florida Supreme Court gave him a temporary stay. The court said it was too busy with the presidential election dispute at that time to hear his appeal. The stay did not last long. Governor Jeb Bush signed a new death warrant. The new execution date was set for January 11th, 2001. On January 11th, 2001, Robert Glock was at Florida State Prison near Stark, Florida. In the morning, he ate his last meal. He had New York strip steak cut into small pieces, fried shrimp, French fries, green beans, Coca-Cola, and heavenly hash ice cream. He used a plastic spoon because inmates are not allowed metal forks or knives. He took communion from a prison chaplain. In the early afternoon, the United States Supreme Court denied his final appeal. There was no dissent. The execution would go forward. That evening, at about 6 p.m., Robert was brought to the execution chamber. He was strapped to a gurney. A sheet covered him. Doctors had some trouble finding a good vein in his left arm. They found a vein on the back of his right hand instead. The warden, James Crosby, read the death warrant. Robert spoke to the warden. He wanted to express his remorse again. At 6:12 p.m., the brown curtains in front of the witness room were pulled back. Robert looked at the witnesses. He spoke into a microphone. He said, "Hey everybody, I killed Ms. Ritchie. I'm sorry for it." He sobbed as he spoke. He said he loved his family. He said he did not blame the execution team because they were just doing their job. Then he said, "I believe that killing to prove that killing is wrong is wrong." He paused. Then he said, "I'm ready to go see Jesus." He closed his eyes. At 6:15 p.m., the execution began. The first drug was sodium pentothal. It put Robert to sleep. The second drug was pancuronium bromide. It stopped his breathing. The third drug was potassium chloride. It stopped his heart. Robert gasped. His chin quivered. After about a minute, his body went still. A doctor checked him. At 6:28 p.m., Robert Dewey Glock II was pronounced dead. He was 39 years old. Outside the prison, Robert's wife Sheila stood with about 24 protesters. They held candles and sang. She said that if Robert could have given his life for Sherilyn's, he would have. She said her husband did something bad, but she believed the state also did something bad by executing him. Sherilyn Ritchie's father, Cummit Johnson, spoke from his home in Palmetto, Florida. He said that August 13, 1983, was a day that would live in infamy for his family. He said that after 17 years, his family was still devastated. He said the execution would not bring back his daughter. He also noted that Carl Pugliati was still on death row. He said that only solved 50% of the problem. Carl Pugliati remained on death row after Robert's execution. He was 38 years old at the time of Robert's death. As of that date, no execution date had been set for Pugliati. The story of Robert Dewey Glock II is the story of a man who was abused as a child, who grew up without love, who fell under the influence of another man, who kidnapped and robbed a schoolteacher, and who shot her multiple times in an orange grove, leaving her to die clutching her husband's baseball mitt, before being caught, convicted, sentenced to death, and executed by lethal injection 17 years later.